Um, yeah, and that's our signal. If you don't want to be recorded on the YouTube, feel free to turn your camera off. Otherwise, we will record the session for posterity and share it on Reflow's Milwaukee Water Stories page. So thank you for that. Um, my name is Michael Tim, and I am a writer and the project manager for the Milwaukee Water Stories program of the nonprofit Reflow. And thank you all for taking some time on this election day, April 1st of 2025, to drop in on this roundtable via Zoom. And the hope is to share some of the fruits of the last year and a half of this kind of collaborative, informed storytelling work. And then to kind of talk together about what ideas you may have about stories to pursue, stories that you're interested in, and or projects that are going on that would be good for folks to know about. And then with a background to that, thinking about, well, how might we make some of these things real? And that is kind of our overview agenda. On the call, behind the scenes, I have Justin Haggerty, who is Executive Director of Reflow, and he's going to be helping with the Zoom, and also we're going to get into like a shared idea flip board for virtual post-it notes in a little bit. And I also have on the call Sarah Gale Luther, who is a very talented local artist in Milwaukee who supported the illustration for a number of our stories. And we're going to be able to share a little bit about what the work that Sarah did to visualize these things beyond the words and beyond the journalism. That was my role. So I won't always be able to check the chat, but feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat as we move along. It's about a third about share out of the fruits of this collaborative effort over the last couple of years. About a third of like, let's talk together about what's going on now that we might focus on into the future if we were to do like a volume 2 kind of effort. And then we'll see where that conversation goes. So, um, the high level for the Milwaukee Water Stories program of the nonprofit Reflow, whose mission is to support community water projects, is that we have over the years produced or curated or supported different interactive maps, stories, games, illustrated stories in this last year and a half, and videos that support education and engagement for the general public as well as for youth. I sometimes use the jargon of MWS for Milwaukee Water Stories. Over the last year, we had support from a Wisconsin Coastal Management Program grant that's through the state of Wisconsin, supported through NOAA, to work on journalism that would be guided by roughly quarterly virtual roundtables like this one, where we got people together who were interested to kind of pitch story ideas and then talk through like, okay, well, what might be the resources to look into if we wanted to write about those. And then we had a gracious partnership with Urban Milwaukee, who agreed to publish those stories over the course of 2024. And so the link in the chat goes to the page that has a link to all these articles. I'll go ahead and go there on the screen so you can kind of see, just in case you're not familiar or if it's not easily to link in the chat. So this is, I've alternately called a landing page, but all of those articles that were published in Urban Milwaukee, kind of chronologically reverse order, are linked here. And we also did video companions to those that some of you have seen. We won't put them on the Zoom because video on Zoom is kind of challenging, but feel free to check those out at a later date. They're not meant to be the whole story. They're meant to be complementary to this whole suite of storytelling. And they cover different themes. So one of them was the collaboration around the Waterway Restoration Partnership, specifically the Kletch Dam Fishway, and what that meant for the restoration of sturgeon, naturally reproducing populations into the Milwaukee River system. And so this takes the language that Mark Denning, an Indigenous leader, speaking at an event at Kletch Dam Fishway, uses that as a voiceover for these illustrated contextual pieces that were also part of this illustrated storybook aimed at younger audiences that has very few words in it, but a lot of pictures. Glad that Sally is able to join us. I know Water School is just letting out. So the bell from Water School is just let out, and now they're jumping on the Water Story Zoom. Those people get their gold stars for the day. I can't see the chat, but I know I'm noticing that folks are filtering in. Thanks for making time. We're just providing an overview of the Milwaukee Water Stories effort from 2024. Which again, you're welcome to click on any of those articles to read them fully, but they took different perspectives. The first two were kind of high level, a little bit deeper dives into a theme, the fish restoration I was just mentioning, and then also chloride pollution in Wisconsin waters, which many partners are concerned about and are doing science on, and there's policy implications. And so those stories were really kind of like Nat Geo in depth based on what people brought to the table at these roundtables, saying like, hey, can you do a story on our chloride reports? Can you do a story on our collaborations around the clutch? No, they didn't say about the clutch, but around the Waterway Restoration Partnership Program. And I said, sure, what's interesting about these things and how can we get visual connection points? So those were flowing from these meetings. And then over the course of the year, we had a few more of the Zooms that led to more project-specific and location-specific articles, including there was a whole day that was programmed around climate justice in the Lincoln Creek Greenway. So I went along and kind of shadowed that, and then talked to some folks and took some pictures. And some of the folks on this call were participants or organizers of that event. When we went on a walk. Uh, Indigenous-led walk for water, all the way from the Lincoln Park, who we have some folks representing here, all the way down to the Menominee Valley, which was striking because some of us had been on that path before, but maybe hadn't walked all 11 miles. So that sticks in your physical memory when those kinds of things happen. So trying to elevate that story that happened and that it was significant. And then very science-based stories. Dr. Russell Kuhl from School of Freshwater Sciences had come to a number of the Zooms and suggested story ideas that would be worth looking into in terms of harbor nutrients and how that would affect perch dynamics. And that was a pretty in-depth story that the editors at Milwaukee had a fun time editing when I sent that in. And collaboration with Sweetwater. I think someone from Sweetwater is on the call. The work that nonprofit is doing to support municipalities around non-point source pollution, pretty significant. Green Tech Station, an area that Reflow supports, as well as other partners. And youth art engaged in that space. So that was a very visual kind of portfolio kind of piece that had a nice video companion. So we're able to do a lot because people decided to share what they're interested in. And then we had a little bit of support to take the time to duck into those things. And along with that, we said, well, okay, some people read articles and then, that's one way of engaging, but illustrations are another way that can really live on. And so we wrote ourselves in the grant that we were going to do illustrated stories. So that was part of what we wanted to do. What I have on the screen now, and I'll kind of slow roll through it, and I'll provide a frame, and then I'll mute myself and let Sarah talk through what this process was like for her and how this can be used and shared by different partners. And I think Sally Callan, Friends of Lincoln Park, is on the call now. Sally had suggested coloring pages, and we do have some coloring pages now up on the site, which I'll scroll past our maps too. So you can go ahead and print these off and use them at tabling events if you're so inclined, if they're of interest, if they're of value. They kind of diagram what the sewer system looks like underground, which Sarah and I spent a bit of time prepping on. I think Sarah and I learned a lot about that. So with that as a segue, the story that this was associated with was also a fruit of these roundtables. Sorry for the hyper scroll here, but this last article, even it might have been the first one we started working on, but it was the last one that got published. And that involved this company, Rapid Radicals, that Dr. Paige Peters, who is a Milwaukee scientist and entrepreneur, started up. And without going into the details, you're welcome to read it. We decided early on that, this might make a good illustrated story because the value that this company was positioning themselves for, which is to rapidly treat sewer overflows distributed through a city or through a municipality. It's kind of complicated to explain. They're kind of in the prototyping stage now, but it has merit to it. So how could we use that as a way to also educate people about how does their system work and what are some of the challenges to that, and how a young woman from Milwaukee was building a tech that could potentially, be used throughout the world to change how we treat water. So that was a big ask, but Sarah was up to the task in a lot of meetings, and we scoped this out. So that's going to be my segue to mute myself and Sarah introduce you, and then tell me like if you have a page you'd like me to go to. Otherwise, I'll kind of slowly go through this.
Yeah, I think just slowly scrolling through it. I mean, I feel like you gave a really good introduction to the challenge. And I don't know, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah. I work in Milwaukee as an artist. I also work at Escuela Verde High School, running our student-run cafe, New Line Cafe. But yeah, this was an amazing design challenge to be gifted this story of pages, and figure out how to tell not only the story of her like entrepreneurship and her innovation, but to also figure out what back information was needed for people to really be able to understand the depth of what she was doing. So it was great to kind of tackle like, okay, we really need to lay out. And Michael also did some really excellent coaching on kind of like how to make this a true comic book and something that more people might be interested in as a narrative. So kind of setting out like some conflict and some like the challenges that she was up against, and what the impetus of creating this business was, but then also kind of injecting a lot of the really important information about infrastructure and how sewage treatment works in Milwaukee, and how our old infrastructure feeds into Jones Island and how that's been adapted over the years. And then why it's important to continue to adapt that system. So you'll see like there's a lot of diagramming that's happened to kind of tell that broader story of Milwaukee and our infrastructure. But then it kind of moves into some of the more scientific like the challenges of illustrating the like scientific process that Paige had to take on to understand how to treat wastewater like more closely to its source, and to kind of figure out how to prevent these overflows from happening, or if they were going to happen, how to treat the overflow. So it was just, as an illustration project, it was a really fun challenge to figure out how to make it fun and beautiful, but also really, really informative. So it was a very cool collaboration to work with Michael and figure out the text and the pacing of the story and how all of these pieces came together to kind of tell this really big, informative story of Paige and her innovations for Milwaukee sewer system, which, as you see on the very last page, it's like there's kind of this big question of like, do we continue to put money into this aging sewage treatment system that we've had for many years that was wonderful at the time, but with more people and more pavement and more water because of climate change, is it going to stand the test of time, or do we need to continue to like re-innovate like our infrastructure systems and create something totally different? And so this is a cool, it's asking really big questions, but it's also like proposing some pretty cool ideas. So yeah, it was just a great challenge, great story.
I sped ahead to that page that Sarah was
Yeah,
talking about. So
that's
sorry
great.
for that, but you're welcome to, on your own time, take a look at that PDF, and then the way that it's visioned also, and we're going to print a few of these and do them like my Zoom is filtering some of this out, but if you can imagine, there's page spreads here, so looks like the Zoom doesn't like to show you the content, but you can imagine this is a page 8.5 by 11, booklet that that you can print out. And we made that decision to make it 8.5 by 11 so that anybody could print it and then staple it themselves. So that was a thought for if a teacher wants to use this or an informal educator wants to use this, they can just print it. They don't have to do anything special. Just print it. It can print black and white. It can print color, and you just staple it or print the pages that you need. And that is one of the ways that we wanted to kind of leverage this. Uh, One of my touches was, once we get into kind of comic book mode, sometimes it's easy to think that it's some fictional scenario and it's not a real thing. So I wanted to have the backstop of the end of the book kind of give us a little bit more grist if people want to get into that, but also remind us of the partnerships and real numbers behind it, and that this takes a lot of time. As well as there's a glossary So from an educational standpoint, this isn't a lesson plan in of itself, but it certainly could complement or support or be built into any number of lesson plans. And there's a lot of good public resources that we refer to, as well as kind of common terms that a lot of us on this call, being water people, are familiar with, but a lot of people who are just members of the public are not. And so to kind of harmonize the sense of what are these people talking about when they talk about a catalyst, when they talk about an overflow, what does that mean? So giving common language for a teacher who might be using this booklet in their own way was part of how we wanted to structure this comic book. So I'm fairly pleased with how this turned out, and Sarah did a wonderful job iterating a lot of complex things over a long period of time. And so this is one example of what grew from this collaborative process. I mean, could someone have done this on their own, like in a corner? Maybe, but I think it was a lot richer because this was, um, with the support of this business and their principals who are Milwaukee based, and we work with them. What the journalism was independently produced, and so the roundtable suggested story ideas, suggested partners, but then I would run around and talk to people and do some research and write this stuff, and nobody edited it away, But the with the illustrated pieces, we wanted to make sure that we had some kind of um, relationship with those partners. So one of them was the Rapid Radicals. Another one, maybe to put you on the spot here, just the salt piece, just because that's a nice one pager as well. I mentioned the fairly in-depth, somewhat dry work on salt from a journalistic perspective, but Sarah did a nice job of digesting that uh, technical information, and we worked together to put it into kind of this visual narrative that's a one pager that if those of you who were at the Sweetwater conference a couple of weeks ago, the lunch keynote was on the sewer pack chloride work. And I had someone come up to me in the break and say, they should just handed out these. And so I was kind of tickled about that because I felt like, yeah, this is a good compliment to the very in-depth research that is happening to quantify and to understand the movement of chloride into and through our water systems. But for the general public and for a young audience or for a homeowner who is the one who may be thinking about how to keep their walks and drives um, safe, this is one of those resources that might make you think twice and think differently. And so I think there's an educational curve happening right now around chloride. So I wanted to make the point that Reflow is not a chloride research nonprofit, but we recognize that a lot of these water topics are intersectional. And if we want healthier, cleaner water for all of us, it takes, more than one partner in the room. So this is another illustration example. I think at 20 minutes past, it's a good segue to all of us as resources. So I'm going to go ahead and take a peek in the chat as I also um, invite Justin to stage our idea flip. And then also I'm going to bring up my prompting for who's in the room right now and what are we interested in. So what we are going to pivot to at this point is going to be kind of open conversation, but also with a virtual blackboard for post-it notes. And I forgot one very important thing, which I'm supposed to wave around here, which is the book. So, and I promise it'll be less of me rambling in just one moment. So, and David is coming in. Okay, so we wrote those 15 articles, and then there's a 236 page book with lots of illustrations in it that we put together. It's kind of like a Nat Geo, and it's all online. You can see all the stuff online, but it's kind of a different scenario to have the book in your hands. It's a nice glossy, thick text book, lots of pictures, lots of partner efforts featured. And we're kind of proud of that. So if you're interested, you can go to this page and take a look at what the PDF looks like rather than the kind of blurred Zoom that you just saw. But that is something that we have a limited run of. And if folks are interested, we can part with those for 60 bucks a pop. That covers the printing costs. There's been a fair amount of interest, and we also have 2 copies in the Milwaukee County Federated Library System. So if you don't want to buy one, but you want to take a peek, they are holdable there just with your library card, and very proud of that. But that's something above and beyond what we promised in our grant, but it really is the fruit of all of this kind of collaborative effort over the years to showcase those things in one document that's kind of special. So proud of that, but also, that's volume one. What could volume two look like? That's the segue into what do we want to talk about in this calendar year and thinking ahead into next calendar year. Um, what are we all bringing to the table? Why are we here today? Who are you from a perspective around water? And then I'm going to segue to Justin to kind of set the frame for what this screen is all about.
Yeah, so thank you, Michael. So this is Idea Flip. So we like to use this. It's kind of like a virtual post-it board. And Michael's going to copy that into the chat. But when you first open it up on the right-hand side, you would open up that stationery tab. And then there's 2 prompts up. The first prompt on the left-hand side is your/our water story ideas. And what do we wonder about it? So this is Michael's opening prompt here about, he just presented all of those water stories from, essentially the last year. The idea here is, are there other water stories that are out there that folks would be interested in hearing about? This particular resource about, having deep dives and artists participate in trying to communicate these water stories, these local water stories, is the next phase is starting here. So if folks have ideas about where to take this, this would be where we can begin that brainstorm. So to do that, in the tab, the stationary tab on the right-hand side, maybe Michael, you can demo this, but you would left click on any of those post-it notes. The exercise today, the colors don't mean anything, so you can go ahead and grab your favorite color there, and then you'll just left click and drag it into the box. And what Michael's showing here is the second prompt, which is upcoming events. When we've done these meetings in the past, folks have wanted to use this platform to share upcoming events or activities that might be coming up that folks in the water sector or sectors might be interested in. So please feel free to respond and kind of post some upcoming things that people might be interested in checking out.
Thank you, Justin. And so I think there's some people jumping onto the idea flip, which is awesome. So if you're comfortable and if this is the way that you learn or share, feel free to engage and drag some post-it notes around. We also were talking through, I wanted to seed the deck with some of my ideas of things that are kind of interesting to me that may or may not be interesting to everyone. And if you want to signal support or questions around these, you can tag them with a like a thumb up or a thumb down kind of thing. Like if a lot of people are interested in urban rural connections around managing water across watersheds, then you might want to put like a little plus by that because you're interested in that. You upvote it kind of. Feel free to interact with these as you see fit. We're trying to suggest some possible story ideas that could be worth looking into and or documenting and or sharing. And then the ones that I put up also have, in my view, the potential for some interesting visual components. So with the urban rural watershed idea, there's a lot of projects that are paying a lot of money to do work up, quote unquote, up watershed in more rural areas with a benefit downstream. But it's hard to show how those things are all connected without some kind of good visualizations and then also to understand the quantities involved. And so that's where I thought it could be interesting visually. Also, I was invited in the last couple of weeks through Watermarks, project that we support, to a MyAd meeting. And I'm not sure if Kelly was able to be on this call or not. I know that HJ was unable to join in. Um, but I learned about how people are using zines to do communication in a really small amount of space, but with kind of a high impact visually and information density. And so something like federal money flows, that sounds really boring, right? But it's kind of important to understand how money does or doesn't flow into different projects that may or may not interact with water. And so that the thought there was maybe there's some kind of really meaningful research deep dive that results in an infographic that helps people understand where money comes from and what happens when it doesn't flow. Um, so that is on there not only for the intrinsic potential, but for the visual potential. I'll also speak to aquaculture because that one may not be immediately obvious to folks. Globally, like what people eat as the population increases and where we're getting food from, protein especially is a major thing. And right in School of Freshwater Sciences, there's a research lab that's looking into um, how to fish feed more efficiently and more sustainably, to be very high level about it. And so I throw that up there because I think aquaculture is going to be one of those protein portfolio alternatives into the coming decades, and Milwaukee might have um, a role in that. And that's potential curiosity. So that may not be immediately obvious. Why does he have that on there? That's what that rationale is. So if folks who have been adding your own, if you want to go ahead and raise your hand and then unmute in that order to talk about what you've been posting and to share a little bit about yourself and your perspectives, this would be a great time for that. So I will go ahead and mute and then kind of manage that, assuming some will. Or failing that, I will narrate until we have folks who may jump in. So we have a story idea, someone traveling to different cities that don't have a lot of green and blue spaces and coming back to Milwaukee with a greater appreciation. Milwaukee community stories behind green infrastructure projects. What are your goals that will shape the ideas? Smiley face. So this, I can speak at length to my goals, but I want to emphasize that this process is kind of about our goals potentially because we don't have independent funding just to do everything we might have a goal for. So this is partly contingent on resources, but partly like, what do we really want to share? And that's why I threw in things also like the microbreweries thing. What does that mean to me? This means we have a lot of breweries that they go. There's a lot of interest around these. There's a lot of money that goes into them, but then sometimes they go bust. And yet, it's part of Milwaukee's identity is like we're a beer city, and you need to have clean water to have good beer. So, just exploring those intersections between brewing in Milwaukee is not something that I've seen done at a magazine level before. So, part of my goal is like expose intrinsic interest to people, but part of our goal is to support partner efforts that are already happening. Um, Thinking of making a zine with stories about water collected at Fabula events. Awesome.
I can actually, I mean, we've been making little zines with the little ultra shorts that people write at our events. And I saw on the other side, when you mentioned, has anyone here been to Milwaukee Zine Fest? If you haven't, I do think that people should check it out this year. It's a free event. I just put the link in the chat. It's April 19th at Central Library. There are so many people there, a lot of creatives, and you can buy works and whatnot. But I think it might be a really good forum for getting things into the hands of the general public. And I guess Xfabula will be there, so swing by if you want to see what we're up to. But I guess we might just go ahead and make the zine that we're doing. We're talking real lo-fi. But I wonder if there's ways to collaborate to collect more stories and distribute them broadly. So that's and I don't know if people are all familiar with what a zine is, but if anyone wants to see examples, I'll grab one in a sec.
Very cool. Thank you, Megan, for jumping in first.
We have a little zine too that we use about the Great Lakes. It's called Five Great Lakes. It's a little paper fold zine.
Yep,
Mhm.
same. So just the 8.8 page structure.
We did a zine project with our water school groups this year too, which was really fun.
Well, on that zine note, the MIAD event on the 24th of April from 11 to 1, MIAD is doing an Earth Week event in Catalano Square. We were invited to table or have half a table there. But the students in a service learning project, and I don't know if there's anyone on the call who can speak to this more directly. If you are, please jump in. I only went there one day. But they're doing some really awesome work with illustrated zines, where it's one piece of paper, but they folded it and they folded it again, and then it was pretty cool. So that's maybe another opportunity. There's also this event that we're invited to participate in on the 22nd of April at 5 to 8 at the Milwaukee Artists Resource Network. It's not zine focused, but Sarah and I are planning to be there to share these things in person at a table. Wrote an article to be positioned in this Purevent Living magazine, and they're having a release party with an Earth Week focus. So that would be another cross connection for those who have made zines or want to share them. I think those two events would be cool. And I've jotted the April 19th event down on my calendar. This year, I think I might actually be able to make it. Last year, I couldn't make that Zine Fest. I wanted to go, but I have not been there yet. So that'd be really cool. And to your ask and offer of collecting different voices, I can't speak for the environmental youth organizations who have internships, but in the back of my brain, it feels like there could be the opportunity to do storytelling with young people who are having some kind of internship. And maybe that's a pathway to explore from Megan, your interest in more voices.
Yeah, I can speak on that a little bit. From the Environmental Youth Collaborative and being on the Youth Engagement Committee, I know that we, in our evaluation talks, have mentioned following along a select few interns to hear their stories. And if we wanted to kind of pick out a couple of them and give them maybe some prompts around water specifically, I think that might be an opportunity to get some more direct voices from the youth as an option.
Yeah, let me just highlight, Michaela. We have done some storytelling workshops with some of the different groups involved in the environmental youth collaboration in the past. So if there's interest in that, like let's have a conversation. Because I think sometimes more than just giving people prompts and having them write like a free form paragraph, you want to help them craft an effective story that's really going to get into emotion and details and essential change and whatnot. So we have some funding for that sort of stuff. So if folks, if there's interest, holler.
Hey, yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's definitely something that, even if it's not through the youth collaborative, that I know Nearby Nature, our internship is actually called the Land and Water Stewardship Program. But I know that a lot of the other organizations may do work around water, but not centrally focused on water. But the way that water plays in the background of those stories could be impactful.
Can anyone direct me to any other zine related post-it notes that would be good to focus on as we're in the zine discussion before I pivot to another zone?
I didn't make a post-it note yet, but I always thought it would be cool to do a zine of like all of the AAEP award winners, or like an accordion fold book. That's my sign language for accordion fold book. um, like even something that could be added to. I've been messing around on my phone with my printmaker app to take photographs and then make it look like a woodcut, and yeah, or trading cards.
I think ESC is loving that idea if I'm now up to speed in the chat. So there's some interest there from the artists in the room. Cool. Thank you for jumping in on the zine discussion. It sounds like there is some traction there one way or another. And is anyone from uh, let me see. I'll just speak on behalf of it. I also support the Watermarks Initiative, and it's not really a zine, but it's kind of zine size. We're working on what we're calling a field atlas, which is going to be like a little passport booklet to be brought out in May, and that has some potential for that interactivity with it. We workshopped it with the reflow interns a few weeks ago, and one of them drew herself in there really amazingly on the kind of the page that was a prompt for including one's self-portrait. So I would just want to echo that kind of work, when it's also has a little bit of an interactive flair to what the recipient would have in it, I think is a really cool um, medium for getting at our hearts and minds. Any other discussion on zines? I'm going to read this one. Water quality for taste in high quality products, beer, coffee, espresso. Heard of a national espresso competition where people bring their local water to national conferences to control the quality. The US Coffee Championships.org. So that's interesting. So the quality of water.
That was me.
That was you?
Yeah, yeah.
You want to speak to that?
Several years ago, when Reflow was at Arts at Large, maybe Karen remembers this, we all had to learn, or got to learn, how to make espresso for customers that would come into the cafe. And I got to learn that from, I forget his name, but he owns Uncle Wolfie's now. But anyway, he told me about how there's this national competition about coffee and espresso, and people will travel with water from their region because it's so sensitive that they get used to like fine tuning these high quality cups of coffee for a very specific like filter and coffee, and the water is such a major component to that they'll actually transport packages of water to these national competitions to kind of emphasize their local water quality in these larger competitions. So that was kind of cool. That was like a story from several years ago that I think would be fun to follow up with.
Kind of cool. Thinking about the transport of water, right, for making products.
Thank you, Ellie, for the Wolfgang's name in there.
Oh, okay, here we are. Zine about African American Environmental Pioneer Awards. I presume that's Melanie. That's an awesome idea. And do you want to jump in and explain that for those who may not be familiar with that event, which happens every year? Melanie, do you want to speak a little bit on that for those who aren't familiar?
Sure. That is an annual awards program that recognizes African American environmental leaders in the community. Mars is here. She is one of the organizers and the award recipients. I'm putting a link in the chat. I have this set of cards from Urban Intellectuals that's on the Black History flashcards. They're just a series of decks of cards with different topics. And I always thought like Milwaukee could have its own like deck of cards for leaders of color in the community, in the environmental community, or a zine. So there's like a photograph and then some history on the back. I like that type of format. It's really fun.
Very cool. And then you had someone had also shared this link. This is to Zine Fest. I think that's in the chat. Thank you for that. Cool. Let's see if collected stories from community elders 70 plus, visual and ecological adaptations. Does anyone want to chime in on that story idea?
Yeah, I wrote that. Hey everybody, I'm Mars. I put that in there because I was talking to my grandfather recently, who is 92, and he was talking about the way the Milwaukee River used to look. And I said, would you be interested in recording this story? And he was like, oh, I guess so. So I thought that this would be that would be a cool idea, the visual and ecological adaptations, because looking at it from a ecological restoration perspective, if we are trying to include things from the past to help inform current and future, that also includes the people. So wondering if we can collect his story among others, because they are valuable before they perish. Also thinking about the children, when you mentioned collecting stories from the interns and how that might be an intergenerational story. Their perspectives from the same space.
It sounds really cool. I like the same space seen through different eyes, but that might even have relations to them. I think Melanie and Alexis are both highly excited about that as well. What do you feel would be an appropriate mode to invite those kinds of conversations or recordings? Sometimes that can happen organically, and sometimes that it benefits from having a frame around it.
That's a good question. I haven't thought about that in depth, but excuse me, I was eating at the same time. But because that's a really good question as I think about mobility and access. And my grandfather doesn't have internet. He rarely watches television. He rarely talks on the phone. So how will we reach that demographic to feel comfortable sharing their story? Because we don't want to just go in these people's houses. But I don't know, maybe it could be that's utilizing the stories of the youth and maybe whatever elders they might be connected to.
I think a great way to go about that would be looking at the senior community centers. I know that McGovern has their senior community center, and maybe talking there to just see, if there's interest in sharing some of their stories. Just go to where elders are and participating in activities with them to try to invoke some of those conversations, and obviously getting their permission to capture some of those stories and what those look like. I think meeting them where they are. I know that it's hard, like you said, Mars, when there's different things like, oh, they don't use TV or they don't go outside, those types of things, but meeting them where they're already at, I think could be beneficial.
We did an oral histories project here at Adams Garden Park, and it was like a combination of work by MSOE honors department and Raoul Deal's community arts class at UWM and Rob Smith's history class at Marquette, where we had just gathered a bunch of names of local elders to talk about, growing up in the Lindsay Heights neighborhood. They were taped and recorded. A lot of it was done virtually because it was COVID time when we started it. But then we also got photographs of them, and they did a series of, Raoul's class did a series of like prints based on those oral histories. The rain chains on our building were designed based off people who participated in that oral histories project. Rosie Petrie made a quilt that was based on those interviews in that project. So it was kind of like collecting the audio, video, photos, and then growing out from there in a variety of media.
Um, I would love to piggyback off Michaela, and share that where I was growing up, we had story time at our public library where it was like a bring your grandparents, bring your grandchildren situation, and it was such a hit. The grandparents loved getting to spend the time with their grandchildren and share their stories, and the grandkids loved it because it was story time at the library. So if there's a way that we can kind of engage that multi-generational aspect, I think it's also just a really special way of sharing those stories that Mars you brought up in the first place. But the public library has the benefit of being a relatively well-trusted institution in the community and has such a long-standing yeah story corporate. Yeah, but having that engagement as well between generations is something really, really special.
StoryCorps, I think, actually has some, like, you can apply to have them come. And some different ways. In fact, Sharon and Larry Adams are featured on a StoryCorps film. I went there to research StoryCorps after one of the conferences I went to where we were like, okay, we got to do something with capturing stories. And up pops, in my research, up pops Sharon and Larry Adams from Lindsay Heights here in Milwaukee.
I should note that Ex Fabula does exist. Like
Yeah.
literally our mission is connecting Milwaukee through real stories, and we do record stories when they're told live at slams. Now,
Mhm.
the challenge with the StoryCorps format is that you end up with hours of content, and then people sometimes try to edit it down. So our approach is a little bit the reverse. We like people to go through a storytelling workshop first to figure out what's important to them, and then tell a shorter story in a format that's much more friendly for using on social media, for using in the radio show and things like that. And we do have, just as an example, I'm not sure if everybody knows, we do have a radio show on WUWM, and we do put out content there that is reaching like a broad audience, so thousands of people can hear it. So if anyone's looking at doing a storytelling, like a personal storytelling project, I would love to discuss how we might do it. I have talked to some different groups in the past, and of course, funding is a major consideration, because even before you can get the stories, it does take some trust building, and that takes some time. So, but there's some work we're already doing that maybe we can weave it together. In fact, we have done events in the past with a theme like water, and I think the thing that was interesting at the time was the partners said, wow, the stories were not what we expected. I'm like, well, the general public may think about water in a different way. And it's good to recognize that. Because ultimately, if your goal is having to do with the general public, sometimes you got to understand what their frame of reference is to start. So,
Yeah, I think working with local experts is a key.
yeah.
Sounds like there's some interest around this intergenerational perspectives and sharing it orally in some way. I'm
Mhm.
hearing a lot of interest around that and recognizing that. To me, one of those frames could be the geography, right? Like the same, whoever put the same space seen through different eyes. To me, that's kind of compelling because your prompt could be the location, and that could, some of the editorial choice could come into like, what location are we asking people to reflect on or to observe or see or feel or recall from? And that could lead to equally rich stories of other things that have nothing to do with that location. But if the location is the constraint, that could be a common element, that could be a reason to bring people together, whether it's in a more formal or less formal kind of listening context. So there are people on this call who I imagine are taking note of this as something to think through, even if it isn't something that all 20 of us embark on. I'm really loving that energy. So thank you, Mars, for sharing that. Thank you all who have one-upped the that thought. Let's see. but I'm
We
gonna
had
pick
thought about
two.
it at a conference one. I wound up in a discussion in Chicago at a conference, like that there were so many stories coming out of the conference that should be recorded and shared. And Milwaukee Water Commons is kind of kicking around the idea of having an intergenerational water conference, um, like inserting that type of collection there, where it might be beneficial to have a young person like interview a community elder like that they don't know necessarily.
You could even do a story slam as the evening's entertainment. We've had that at conferences and it's great.
Uh-huh.
So democratic in that like you
Mm-hmm.
can invite the people who were there to share their expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And of course there are like you can always have folks that are local. You always want to have a couple pre-confirmed tellers. So it's it's always iterative, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think
See,
there's a
I'd
lot of
like to,
energy. Oh, I stepped over somebody. Please, whoever was just
oh,
talking, please go.
this is Andy Hosbach. I wasn't able to get anything put on the board, but I just kind of wanted to share my story idea. I work with the agricultural community. I work with farmers, and a lot of our soils up in the upper reaches of the watershed, which impact the water quality in the city of Milwaukee and so on, are unhealthy. A lot of our agricultural lands are stressed and so on. So I'm working with farmers and we're trying to get the soils to be healthy soils. And if you can truly get the soils healthy by using cover crops and doing no-till and using diversity in crops and so on, the soil structure changes in such a way that the water actually infiltrates into the soil and you don't have all the runoff. The farmers tend to want you get the nutrient cycle functioning the way God and nature intended it to. And as a result, then you have less fertilizer, synthetic fertilizer being applied to the land. You have less runoff, less flooding in the city. So I'm working with farmers to get their soils more healthy, and I'm working together with MMSD to do that. I'm contracted with MMSD, and I always thought it would be nice to tell a story about what the agricultural community is working towards to improve water quality in the Milwaukee River. Just my little thought.
I too think that's an undertold, understood, especially in urban areas, story. And there's an opportunity for building a lot of goodwill across those regional boundaries. So
Right.
I'm interested in exploring where that all goes. And then the other part of my brain wants to quantify the impacts and understand like how is this making a difference and to visualize that. So I hear you. And let's keep in touch on this. Um, this is a great example of how there's lots of different perspectives around water that can come to the table, and they're all valid. Um, I want to recognize that it is about 5 minutes to 4. We're going to keep going because there's more post-it notes on here, but I also recognize that people need to shuttle out. There's no worries. But we had a lot of talk about zines. We had a lot of talk about the intergenerational communication. I want to read some other of these post-it notes and let people jump in if they are their ideas. Not sure if done already, life of a water molecule traveling through different areas around Milwaukee from the molecule's point of view.
Mm-hmm. Like a follow the drop.
Yeah, so that was my idea. I work with a lot of younger students and just getting them to see how many uses of water they have, I think is really important. I often start with like, how'd you use water today before you came to school? How do you use water recreationally? How do you use water when you're cooking, washing dishes, taking a shower? Where does water go when it's outside? Following a molecule when it goes from the water cycle, to the atmosphere, to when it's at Jones Island, to when it's going through a fish's gills, to when it's going through someone's body, all those types of different ways that water is all around us, and making it interactive, with like not an actual water droplet, but like a little molecule that follows along the page, things like that.
Very cool. So, and there's also a common thread in the chat I'm seeing about the microscopic. There was a note about the microbial, which is similar to what you just suggested, in that they're both sort of microscopic domains, but they're both important. So the physical and the chemical movements of water and how we interact with water, how do we use water? Are we even conscious of all the ways that we are interacting with water in our daily lives? And then also the microbiome, which again, from a headline perspective is challenging, right, to communicate, but from a deep dive into an illustrated opportunity, that can be really exciting because you can do things with illustration that you can't do as easily with words because of scale. So thank you for those notes. Does anyone want to one up or suggest thoughts that you have occurred to you with respect to the life of a water molecule traveling through different areas around Milwaukee?
Sure, I put it in the chat, but I'll say it here. I think that's a great idea because that can be expanded into a series. If you were talking about zines or graphic novels, you can follow this molecule forever. You could just keep telling different stories and it can be connected to whatever current event or marketing purposes that Reflow has.
Cool. And with my ignorance, can someone explain Flat Stanley to me? And hopefully this doesn't mark me as a horrible human being, but
I don't know what it is either. Pray
It's
tell.
we grew up with it, like
So
the,
fun.
millennial, maybe older Gen Z generation. It's kind of like the age group of Captain Underpants or Diary of a Wimpy Kid, but Flat Stanley got he was lying in bed and like I think it was like a bulletin board or something. Something silly fell on him and flattened him. So it's this like almost 2D protagonist just flapping about his adolescent life.
cool. All
Well,
right.
For Flat Stanley, some kids will do a drawing, like they will outline their body and cut it out and it'll go on adventures. And I guess that's the thing I thought where you were like, just thinking about like people putting representations themselves in different water spaces, like it does make for an interesting visual.
yeah, I thought of Ralph from the Magic School Bus.
Yes.
Y'all remember that when they went inside his body because he was eating too many Cheetos?
Miss Frizzle needs to be involved. She makes everything better.
Where's our public librarians in the chat here? We honor you all. Magic School Bus, that one I am familiar with somewhat, but Flat Stanley, that one, oh, thank you. Someone has got a link, so for future reference, we'll share that out. So that sense of like using the illustration and the microscopic to our advantage is one of the takeaways I'm taking from those notes. And then also this idea of a series, if there's interest in multiple zines on exploring a theme, if there's some kind of common framing element, but then maybe we could even invite multiple illustrators or multiple perspectives to do smaller things and kind of stack them into an assembled series. There's power in that idea as well, because it allows you to invite in different people. So I appreciate those notes.
Just got a water drop alert from MMSD, so
Oh no,
your laundry tonight. And
I haven't gotten mine yet, so I don't know. They must be you must be on the first part of the alphabet, and they're getting to me.
that A last name there.
Oh, now I got it. Yeah, that's what happened. So Ellie, are you still on the call? For those who don't know, Ellie, you're representing Watermarks. Do you want to talk about the water drop alert? I don't know if Ellie is still on the call. I saw her.
I am still on the call.
Oh, do you want to explain how the water drop alert connects with Watermark?
How it connects with watermarks. I don't know if you can hear what's going on around me. There's another meeting happening. So I guess for those of you who aren't familiar with watermarks, what watermarks is a whole process of making that water drop alert sort of physical. And is that what you asked, Michael?
I just was just an opportunity to talk about how these water markers throughout the city have they flash when there's a water drop alert. And so the water drop alert is a text message from MMSD telling you to conserve water to not overwhelm the system when they're forecasting potentially heavy rain or precipitation or melt. And so the water markers is I just wanted to throw you the possibility to talk about that. That is a connection point with what Melanie raised. No other agenda.
Oh yeah, that's great. I feel like it's always good to be able to talk about, and luckily there are a lot of people in this meeting who already know because we get to work together on it. But yeah, it's basically, I mean, the way that I would say it is like a physical representation of the water drop alert. Like Michael said, it's a 30-foot pole that are in different neighborhoods that are watermarks neighborhoods, and they flash. So if you don't already have a water drop alert getting texted to you, the idea is through walks and workshops and working with artists in different neighborhoods, people can be connected to that water drop alert just visually by seeing it.
I'm kind of scanning around to provide a breadth and maybe sacrifice a little bit of depth in the interest of time. So I see the Adopt a Sewer program, litter on street and plug sewer grates leading to flooding. What happens to litter once it enters sewers? Could be an illustrated dynamic to show. Similarly, maybe not microscopic, but similarly unseen things. We don't think about that water bottle in the road after we don't see it, but it doesn't go away, right? Law of conservation of mass and energy, it's still there. And on that note, I just read a recent Science News article that there's the equivalent of 3 bottle caps of plastic in many people's brains. So that's a sobering fact. So plastic, as relates to waste and water, is one of those things that's probably not going away either. It's challenging
Yeah.
to find the way into that story, but someone wants to jump in.
Yeah, I didn't want to cut you off, but I was
No,
just
please.
thinking of like um trapped water, and a lot of people don't realize how much water we're trapping when people throw away half-used water bottles and they go to landfills, and that water is now removed from completing its water cycle journey and lives in the landfill until that bottle's open, because it just continues to break down with the bottle, trapping the water there, just for general knowledge.
Landfills itself is a big one too that has a lot of implications. UWM Story Cart is another way to gather stories. It's a student run and seems like they pick one topic per year, but I wonder if they can or could partner and do a water theme question that could be useful to them and also to Reflow or others and be a cool collaboration. Does anyone on this call have a direct connection to the UWM Story Cart people? That's something I can look into. Thank you for
They're
that. No.
in the building right next to me.
Okay. Do you know how they make decisions about their theming?
I don't. I think that Lori Marks has asked for a set story cart, so I think they have one, and then to me, story carts are kind of similar to the carts that you all make at Reflow, where it's like there's some that exist, and also you can have some that are like customized. So I think it's just a matter of sort of meeting and discussing and budget for making something like that happen.
Do you know, do they go mainly off campus? Or are they mainly an on-campus thing? Are they a citywide thing? I've heard of them and I'm not exactly sure what their scope is.
I don't know how many there are. I know that there's one on campus, and I don't know how many more there are.
I think they were, last I chatted with their director, they were re-envisioning how they were going to do it. And I think that frankly, the current humanities program funding, I believe it is on pause because of that, but I couldn't tell you for sure. They do have a relatively new director that might be worth talking to.
Okay, that's good to know. It's hasn't been entirely off my radar, but it's been pretty far in the periphery of my radar, so I can move it closer to the middle of the radar to learn more. I'm going to read these Post-it notes. Soils on farms in the upper reaches of the Milwaukee River, cover crops, nutrient management, infiltration. Andy was speaking to that. What the agricultural community is doing to improve water quality in the Milwaukee River. That's very similar to what Andy had mentioned verbally. And then separately, but with a connection with farming, but urban farming, it'd be cool to capture stories of urban farmers, the importance of water in their work, and maybe even their cultural background. Feels like someone has some other things they might want to add with this note, I have a feeling. Does anyone want to speak to deeper connections here?
Yeah, that was mine. So this is Yessi Perez with 16th Street Clinic. Just one of the things that I feel like I've been hearing a lot lately, or not one of the things, just one of the spaces that I've been frequenting a lot is this like urban agriculture space. And so with that, I attended the Michael Fields they had a Milwaukee Urban Ag like network event at the public library the other day. And even just like in the round of introductions that we were doing, so many people mentioned water and just the importance of water, which I thought was so beautiful. Just like off the bat, the first thing, everybody mentioned something around water. We had folks, there were like maybe like 15 folks at that event at the library, and it was just kind of like a get to know each other, the work that's being done, seeing if we could collaborate on like different workshops and like pollinator workshops and different like educational events. Some folks worked like at actual farms, and some were like in school, more like educational spaces. So I feel like this would be a really cool idea to empower and uplift folks that might be experiencing some of those I don't know, frustrating times too, like in federal cuts and whatnot.
Thank you for elaborating on that.
Hmm.
Others who have ideas there's a lot of intersection with urban farming in Milwaukee, so I'm excited if others want to explore or offer your ideas or questions or perspectives on this one. The time of year is often interesting for urban farming too, because at least in our area, it's, you have your winter and you have your planting and then your growing season. And I think I've heard the Victory Garden Blitz is back up again this year. Does people know? I think I've seen it on calendars.
Yes,
That
it is.
Those who know more, if you want to jump in, a lot of people probably know about that, but maybe not everyone. So it might be worth just mentioning if someone has knowledge about that.
So I think it's an initiative that is done through VGI where they you have to sign up to receive a garden bed, but they charge with like what is it called? It's not like a set charge. Um it might be like income based, like a scale, a sliding scale. There we go. I'm forgetting what it is right off the bat, and they might have like zip code focus areas. But it's a super cool way to get a quick garden bed. I've got mine a few years ago before they stopped doing it. So this is like the first year it's back, I think, in maybe 2 years. And they built the bed out for residents, and then they also fill it with some really beautiful, rich soil. Um, and then they gift you some seeds as well. So it's like a full kit.
And that's really accessible for anyone with raised bed gardens. And then urban farming, depending on how we're defining that or what scale, there's lots of different kinds of urban farming too, which could be interesting to explore. Um, the which partners get featured and in what context is one of those kind of operational challenges, because there's a lot of folks who are doing urban farming. Um, and so maybe the questions around water, if it's explicitly water focused, or if it's the kind of plant selections, I'm just kind of brainstorming along those lines. Um, if they're observing any different kinds of opportunities for different plants. There's also what the UW Extension has a lot of those gardens that I know some people who make use of. Um, and helping people understand what that opportunity is for beyond a raised bed garden, and those who get a significant amount of their their food from those over the summers. I was fascinated to learn that from a friend of mine who she was getting a lot of her food summer and fall from her own garden plot there. I'm seeing in the chat there's a vertical farming. Linda, do you want to jump in and share any of these ideas? I haven't been able to keep up on everything in the chat here, but vertical farming sounds like it ties in with this urban farming.
Yeah, it
Also
does.
makes me
And
think,
oh, pardon me.
no,
I can't see everybody's faces. Yes, hi. It does. And I mean, since the slow food movement and growing power and all of those things really put Milwaukee on the map, we really need to have a vertical farming. And we tried it originally with at Kellner's, but that took a different site. So if you don't know vertical harvest, it started in Wyoming, I think, or Montana. And now they have 5 units, and it's vertical farming. It's all enclosed, so they don't have to use insecticides or herbicides or pesticides, and it controls the water. And they actually have all of these, though they have certain significant people working there, are staffed by special needs adults, which is fabulous. And so the biggest one that they're doing is now in Detroit. But I was just thinking about Wisconsin because I don't know if you know, or every time I hear that people in Phoenix don't have any water, it hasn't rained for 4 months in New Mexico, and here we are. And yet our city is still abusing the water that we live on. And we really just need, if everyone really became aware, they would make different choices without a doubt. And I know your zines are more happy and all of that, but sometimes mine get trying to make more movement sooner than later. So anyway, yeah, so vertical farms, I think we could definitely get organizations behind having one and use a building that's empty now and maybe redo it or build a new one. So you can just look up vertical harvest and you should come to it. If you can't, I'll send you the link or I'll put it on the link here in the chat.
100 Acres kind of doing something like that, I believe.
that's what I was wondering about,
In
the one
Century City.
in the corridor. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know a lot about them, but they had a doors open thing this year. Did anyone on the call happen to go to that this year or learn more about 100-acre farms in the, how does that square with the kind of vertical farming that you're talking about, Linda?
Well, the vertical farming I'm talking about is like when I asked students if they've ever been in a car and parked it, and I said, what would our cities look like if all of the parking we had was one level? Remember now everybody, then we started going with vertical parking garages, which have their own issues. But in other words, this single crop, single level growing is archaic. Okay, it's no longer the way the earth needs it because it's deforested and degrassed land and drained wetlands. And we need all of those diverse areas to have healthy water. And so we as Milwaukee have to really set a standard, I remember when the Global Water Center started, I thought, that's it, Milwaukee's going to be the center. And we need to really have zines that inform everyone about water equivalency, like 8 gallons for an apple, 80 gallons for apple juice. I made that one up. I'm not sure of the exact statistics, but it's like that. And so I just think making people more aware and building appreciation for it is really key to taking care of it and in all of the avenues that it reaches, because it reaches everything, every living thing. Without water, we would not be here. It's only second to air. So.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I want to pivot to the calendar items that people have shared and allow you to talk a little bit more about these events that are coming up, if folks may be interested in learning more about them. I see, Melanie, you've got 2. Do you want to jump in on yours? And then I'll zoom to this pink one that I can't quite read.
Oh, for events.
Yeah.
Szymanski Biedola is having an exhibition at our offices. It's opening gallery night and day. If you're not familiar with Sue's work, she is an activist, artist, printmaker, puppet maker. that works primarily on water issues and mining issues. She's been involved with the Native American community, pushing back on mining in like Enbridge Line 5. And she's been part of our We Are Water celebration with her puppets and banners and things that she makes. So she'll be here on gallery night and day. We'll have an interactive art activity, and she's making some buttons and things like that. And then we have an Arbor Day event coming up at Middle Ground in the Unity Garden. They are going to be, that's still like in the planning process, but there will be some tree planting and maintenance education going on, some art activities, probably a rain barrel installation workshop, different things throughout the day.
Cool. Thank you. Is anyone here who can speak to this Milwaukee Coastal Flooding Study presentation this Friday at 11? Anybody still on the call who posted that note? I'll try to look more into that and find out what that is. I'm not sure who posted that, and I'm not familiar with what it is, so I will be curious to learn. Anyone, the Freshwater Symposium, looks like May 9th at 10 a.m. Anyone from SFS still here? In the past, that's been students presenting their work, usually, I don't know, 3, 4, or 5 to 7 of them, depending on how big the class is. They're usually pretty good talks. I try to go to some of those. I can't get to all of them. If it's symposium, it's probably the master's students rather than the ones who have done internships. So that is pretty cool. And I see, here's the note about the Zine Fest. So that was the April 19th event that was mentioned earlier. Thank you for the link. Any other events I didn't mention? I mentioned Green and Healthy Schools Conference. Justin, you want to chime in on that one real brief?
Yep, just recently that was announced for August 12th, 2025.
That's a good calendar, save the date. And then I threw on this Watermark citywide tour. I know more details are coming, but that's going to be May 10th.
Can save the date for August 24th for We Are Water.
Also, there's going to be the first Lincoln Creek Greenway celebration on April 28th, and it'll be sort of at the end of the Greenway in Lincoln Park. And hopefully it'll be a wonderful way to get neighbors together and celebrate a part of the neighborhood that's really never been addressed or invited to be all part of these celebrations. So we're excited.
What date is that again, Sally?
Saturday, June 28th. I don't think we have a flyer. A lot of partners are on the call.
Oh,
but
yeah.
we're getting that
It's
out.
Lincoln Creek Week, right?
Yes, right.
I don't have Jerica on this call, but I know I've seen a lot of emails I haven't been able to get to yet about that Lincoln Creek Week event, so, or events.
Also, Miss Sally, is Springfest happening May 3rd?
Yes, in Lincoln Park. Yes, our almost 8th annual Springfest.
Thank you for those who are adding those to this part of the board. That May 3rd, there's also a volunteer workday at Green Tech Station. People are looking to double dip by Lincoln Creek and then off of 31st and Capitol. And it's a good chance to see Green Tech Station as well, even though there's a lot of construction over there. It's kind of cool.
Saturday, June 1st, Jerica and I are working on Tubman Park a blackbirding event from 1 to 3. So we'll have a bird walk and talk about water as migration pathways, and we'll have an art activity as well there.
And those that have events that have either in the chat or that I've noted from verbal or that are posted notes here, I'll try to get that out in a form that people can see. I'm not a comprehensive calendar manager, but I know that this is valuable to folks because it's challenging to get a total awareness. And so I think Ellie, if I'll nudge you to maybe nudge Corrigan, who is managing a kind of a community calendar through Watermarks, that might be the venue through which we could share these things. I'm not set up to be the community calendar manager for all things water, as much as that might be really meaningful. It, but I will make a significant effort to get these items shared to those who have a little bit more of a touch point.
We
So
be lovely to have them on our community calendar, and Corrigan definitely can add them if we can, if I can get them in an email, we can add
yeah,
them in like
I'll
permanent.
do that, and I'll do that. So if anyone has any other things like this that you want to share on that order, feel free to email me directly after this, but otherwise I'll make an effort to capture whatever's in this board here, and share that out with whoever attended the call, as well as directing that to Ellie and Corrigan, who through Watermarks have a public facing community calendar on the Watermarks site. So,
Michael, can I add one thing? I
please.
also, I'm a part of a coalition on lead emergency, and the issues that are facing immediately are MPS in the schools and paint, but the long-term issue is the water and filters. And I think it would be, I don't know how you'd fit it in, but I think caution, people don't know enough about lead to be aware that it's a problem until there's a crisis, which was Flint. But I think the more we can connect prevention and we connect dollars going to reparation of pipes and windows, whatever. But I think water gets pretty much made unavailable to us if it's got such contaminants. And PFABs, all those things are going to be part and much more of a crisis as far as dollars spent on making reparations or prevention.
Thanks, Sally, and thanks for your work on the on that group. Closing in on 4:30, so I want to be respectful of a 4:30 hard stop. Does anyone want to jump in on things that we have not touched, but that would be valuable to share with those who are on this call?
Hey, I just wanted to add that I put in the chat, this is Alexis with Greenprint Partners. We were able to film I think they're 3-minute videos of landowners and their stories behind the projects that we've worked on with them for green infrastructure. And we receive philanthropic funding to do that. So those videos are I think there's one more that's being edited, and they'll be done in April. I don't know if anyone else has an interest in, filming any video or combining any stories about kind of upcoming green spaces that the community can use and the stories behind those. But we do have kind of existing assets that we'd love to, help get out further in the community. So I just wanted to flag that since I hadn't spoken yet.
Thanks for that. How are those going to be on YouTube? How are those going to be presented? Is there an event for them, or are they on YouTube?
I can ask our marketing team what the partners were planning to do with them. One partner is with Art Intersection, and so I know they have a website, but I haven't actually asked how they were hoping to share them out. So I can confirm that for you. We don't have a YouTube page, I don't think, like our company, but I think the idea is for them to have them for the community partners to have them for their own outreach.
Well, what are the other two? What are the locations that they're featuring?
1 second. One is, nope, that's not right. Escuela Verde. And then Catapult Wellness, which is in the industrial corridor.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. I'd be curious to see them when they come out. So thanks for sharing that, and I can share that with other folks as well.
Yeah, I can just send you an email too. And then if you want to see if there's anything else, I think it would be cool to combine it with, other community stories, or again, just kind of these are things in the community that you can check out in the near future. They're being built or they're public spaces.
want to open up the floor for, we've got 2 minutes left, but open up the floor to anyone else who hasn't had a chance to jump in with a thought or a question. Hearing none, I want to thank everyone for participating. We'll make a significant effort to get this board shared out as sort of a text, maybe a Google Sheet or possibly an email directly. But really valuable, really fertile conversation, and I'll keep folks updated on these things. High level collaboration points will probably be the top of mind for the next 3-4 months to figure out like what kind of projects could be actionable. But I heard a lot of interest in some kind of zine storytelling, some kind of intergenerational storytelling. And then I did hear that there is an interest in that, the things that we can't see as well that make a big difference, whether that's how water flows through our lives, the microscopic elements of that, the large watershed scale from ag to urban things. I mean, I'm hearing those themes reinforced as well as supported. And then just this more human scale storytelling as an activity that feels like a lot of people are excited about. And there's a number of people on this call who have expertise in that. So thrilled that you were able to participate. Thank you for your interest, and I think we'll adjourn on that note. It is election day, so if you haven't voted, make a plan to vote. And thank you everyone for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.